Good morning, everyone. I'd like to begin by thanking everyone for volunteering to be a scrap member this year. We've gotten a lot of great work done every year, and so we should have another really great productive year this year. So I'd like to begin with introductions of all of the scrap members for the year. So we can start with myself. I'm Rachel Fisher. I am the Member Services Librarian for Technical Services and the CCS Liaison. Tammy? Tammy doesn't have a microphone today, so you can see her introduction in the chat. And says she is from Grayslake and is a cataloger. Adrian?
Hi, I'm the lead cataloger at Palatine Library.
Linda?
Hi, I'm Linda Kahn from Cary, Technical Services and IT.
Nora?
Hi, I'm the head of Technical and Automation Services at Prospect.
Michelle?
Hi, I'm the full-time cataloger at Highland Park.
Jamie?
Hi, Jamie Keene, lead cataloger at Niles, Maine.
Heather?
Hi, I'm Heather Campbell. I'm the cataloging librarian at Lake Villa.
Okay, great, thank you, everyone. In the past, what we've done with the minutes is that I had been producing the minutes and sending them out to ask the scrap members if there are any revisions, and if there are no other revisions, we've just been assuming they're approved as is instead of going through the motion to approve them during the next meeting. Is everyone okay with continuing that process? Yes? Great. Okay, so the next thing on the agenda is the meeting dates. So I wanted to share my screen so I can do a brief demonstration of the website to show you how some of the calendar functions work. One moment. Does everyone see my screen? If you click on meetings and then click on technical and advisory, you can easily access a list of all of the scrap meetings. You can scroll down to the advisory groups and click on scrap. And then this will take you to links to upcoming meetings and past meetings. You can find all of the agendas and minutes from the past meetings by clicking on past meeting dates. It's a bit slow today, one moment. If you open up the meeting item by clicking on the arrow, you can see, oh, I haven't posted the previous minutes yet, but let's see, this one should have it. So this has the meeting recording link, the minutes, and the agenda. I will get today's updated. And you can find the upcoming meeting items by clicking on upcoming meetings. And each one has the link for the Zoom meeting, the phone number, and the meeting ID and passcode. You can also click on Add to Calendar to add it to your calendar in your dashboard, or to bookmark it by clicking on this little bookmark symbol. So our next meeting date will be October 26th, and we will also have one on January 18th and April 19th. Are there any questions about the meeting dates or using the calendar? Okay, great. Next on our agenda is old business. So last year we reviewed the bibliographic input standards and made some suggestions. The majority of the suggestions were minor, so we have not brought it to governing board yet. It does need to be approved by governing board to have those updates made to the catalogers wiki. There are some pending changes of the RDA toolkit that we've been waiting for. And we did receive one more suggestion to review the statement on the unique local materials section. One moment, I can bring that up and share my screen. So I have made some changes to that as a suggestion, but I'm open to hearing any other suggestions that anyone may have. So one of the suggestions were to add more details on when local records could be used instead of the OCLC record, and when the OCLC number could be removed. So my suggestions were just to add the sentence, unique local materials can include local government documents or library of things items. And the local records that have an OCLC number will have holdings set in OCLC. If a library does not want the holding set, the OCLC number can be removed from the local record. Refer to the library of things and local or unique local material pages for guidelines on using local records. Does anyone have any other suggestions or recommendations on how to improve this statement?
Rachel,
Yes.
so about removing the OCLC number from the local record, what if there are two libraries on the record and one would like to have the OCLC number in the record?
It should, I would say the record should say that it only has one library using it. So I guess we could add the OCLC number should be removed only if the one library is using it.
That sounds good to me.
The OCLC number can only be removed when one library is using it.
Or when only one library.
Sorry, did someone say something? I didn't hear you.
Oh yeah, this is John. I was just saying, wait, typing only when only one library is using it might be a better.
I can't hear you very well. Can you type in the chat?
Rachel, he's saying that the OCLC number should not be removed if a library is using it, I think is what I heard.
He was trying
Should
to say
not-
you should add when only one library is using it, as opposed to when one library is using it.
Yeah, however,
No.
unless they all want it removed.
That's
Well,
true
that's-
too.
The
Right, I
OCLC
think-
number,
I think maybe clarifying, the OCLC number can only be removed when, if all attached libraries or all libraries with items on the bib like agree to have it removed or something. But I don't know if that's getting a little too in the woods.
No, that's the idea. Just need to figure out how to say it.
Yeah, I don't think that's too wordy. Or if all libraries on the record agree to have it removed or something like that.
okay. How about the OCLC number should only be removed if all libraries agree to have it removed?
I think like Michelle said, saying, yeah, or how Tammy said in the
Yeah,
chat,
if-
just
exactly.
specifying, yeah.
So Tammy suggested that we add with items attached. So the OCLC number should only be removed if all libraries with item records attached agree to have it removed. Are there any other suggestions? Adrian, I think you were the one that made the suggestion. Are you okay with this revision, or do you have any other questions or suggestions?
No, I think this is much more clear now. Thank you.
Okay, great. Should we move on to the next item, or are there any other suggestions for the statement? Okay, so the next item, I linked to a statement from PCC from an email listserv that documents their plans for adopting the new RDA toolkit. Their timeline has been pushed back. So they, at this time, are not adopting it before October, but they also still need to test all of the Lcpcc policy statements in the RDA toolkit. So at this point, for those who are not familiar, the old RDA toolkit had a list of core items to include in records, but that has not been included in the new RDA toolkit. The new RDA toolkit's suggestion for required elements are really only for a minimal record. Everything else is up to the cataloger to decide. So along the side of the new RDA toolkit are Lcpcc policy statements. So our chart in the bibliographic input standards page does need to be revised. So last year I had added 2 new columns to it so that we can review them and make decisions on whether we should switch to using the Lcpcc policy statements in addition to CCS core, or if we should use the OCLC statements from the OCLC website. We don't have to make a decision today since PCC is not starting to use the RDA toolkit until October at the earliest. But you're welcome to choose to discuss this now or do more research into the difference between the different standards to make a decision at another meeting.
Rachel,
Yes.
why do we need more than one column that just says required in CCS?
We don't. These are just two different options to choose from. So we're going to have one column on the bibliographic input standards page, but you could choose from either having the Lcpcc statements instead of the old RDA core statements, or the OCLC standards. So the difference will be that when there is an element that's Lcpcc core, it will say Lcpcc core. When it's not Lcpcc core, it would say CCS core. And for OCLC standards, if you choose that, it would say mandatory for the OCLC standards, CCS core when it's not mandatory, but it can also say mandatory or required if applicable for the OCLC standard.
So we are including things in this chart that are required by OCLC or RDA, not just local practice.
Right.
Okay. Is that necessary? Did we, I don't know, did we decide to do that instead of just documenting our local practice?
This is how the chart has been, but previously it has said RDA core when it was RDA core. And if it wasn't RDA core, it said CCS core.
Hey, Rachel, Rebecca, for the rest of you, Rebecca from CCS. I just want to clarify what you're saying. So the final product will have either column E, F, or G. Only one of those will display and the group is deciding, or all three of them will display and they have slightly different meanings?
We will have either F or G. So I'll just highlight these two columns to choose from. And this
So
one
E-
will be removed. Well, let's make that blue so you can see that better. So you will need to choose F or G. And if you have other ideas of how this should look, we could change that. If you did want this to just be just CCS core, that could be an option too, instead of referring to the Lcpcc statements or the OCLC statements, but it will have either one just to match the previous statement from the old RDA toolkit.
Okay, so E is going away because it's outmoded now, and then either F or G will display and the group is deciding which one. Thank you for clarifying. I think I have it now in the old nugget.
Okay, so I'm going to add to be removed to E, and then you can see that you can choose between the two columns F and G. Does that make sense, Jamie?
I think so. And so either F or G includes Lcpcc or OCLC core plus CCS core, and CCS core means it wasn't core in LC or OCLC.
Right.
Okay.
So these are a bit different. You can see that with Lcpcc core, there are some things that are mandatory for OCLC that aren't LCPCC core, like the leader and fixed fields. But that there are others that are required as LCPCC core, like the O2O, that are only required if applicable. So the statements are a bit different, depending on whether it's OCLC or LCPCC core. So I do recommend doing some more research into the two different standards and the statements by logging into the RDA Toolkit and just taking a look at the statements along the side and see how the LCPCC statements are written in the toolkit, and then compare them to the OCLC standard statements on the OCLC website.
Rachel, can I just clarify? So this is not just about what goes on the wiki. Ultimately, are we deciding whether or not CCS will adopt new RDA?
Yeah, I would assume that we should talk about adopting it, but I think that eventually the old RDA toolkit will be removed so that I know there are other librarians out there that are trying to decide on creating some other alternative to RDA, but I'm not sure when that will happen. So I think that it's really would be just like a timeline issue of when they would, when you would choose to adopt the new RDA toolkit or not.
And if we do choose to adopt new RDA, I mean, it changes quite a lot of the language from old RDA and things like WEMI. And so would we have to go and edit the wiki again to change the language from things like serials to diachronic works and review all of those pages again that we've just updated?
I don't think we should bother changing that at this time because the RDA language is not normally what people are used to using. I personally don't like it, but I have a lot of personal opinions about the new RDA toolkit that I don't know if I should share. And I'm not sure what our alternative would be if we chose to not adopt it. Would we just have like core statements like to not use abbreviations that we would need to add to the wiki and just go with local practices, or how we would have to even update the wiki then?
I've been under the impression, and somebody please correct me if I'm wrong, but I've been under the impression that the old toolkit isn't going away anytime soon because not every library can has the time to learn and implement the new RDA. Is that right?
I haven't seen anything about that. It might be true.
I was also going to ask, oh, sorry.
Just one more thing is I was going to say that I think it could be potentially very confusing to have old RDA language on the wiki if we're using new RDA as our standard.
And I was just going to ask a possibly dumb question, but is new RDA actually done in theory? Like I know they're testing it, but is it actually ready? Because I actually haven't gone and really looked at it.
The text is stable. And at this point, the testing they need to do is on the LCPCC policy statements to make sure they've been added to the toolkit properly.
Okay. Thanks.
To my mind, the wiki is for people to use. So it should have language that the users, which is primarily catalogers in the consortium, understand. So to me, it seems like we don't need, even if we're ready to say we're adopting the new RDA rather than using the original toolkit, I don't know that we need to change all of the language in the wiki, other than possibly putting some notes that are like, this is referred to as blank in the new, I guess it's not a toolkit anymore, but whatever they call it. So that if someone's, trying to look up and cross-reference things, but I don't see it needing to have everything change, because ultimately it's for use and we want people to be able to use it without getting too confused.
That's a good idea. I think that the toolkit's language in general should match the types of materials in Polaris, so that it would make more sense and is more practical for the cataloger to use, but then making notes on how it's referred to in RDA would make sense. In my experience, I've found that I've never even used the RDA toolkit after I initially learned the basic, rules of, not using abbreviations and things like that, that I didn't need to like go back and look everything up all the time. So I think that maybe making minor notes would be fine. I don't expect everyone to need to look at it every single day. And I do find that it's just makes things a bit more confusing. So it's possible that what you would find for the LCPCC policy statements could be more practical in the RDA toolkit, and that what you'd want to refer to would not be the confusing language in the actual toolkit and what they recommend, which tends to be it's use cataloger's judgment on how to add something, and that the LCPCC statements will be more specific. But you could find that it could be a useful way to just search for the LCPCC statements or access them by the specific links in the chart. So I guess one option could be to choose to adopt LCPCC guidelines as an alternative to the new RDA toolkit. So I'm on a new computer. I was going to log into the RDA toolkit, but I think I'm going to have to find my password first to be able to log in. So that would probably take too long. But I will send out a reminder unless Virginia has your RDA password on you.
It's for everybody has the same password, so
It's still what it was before, because I actually remember what it was.
yeah, it's the same. I really never changed it.
Because it's was it CCS 3355?
Yeah, that's I was gonna look it up, just make sure
Yeah,
I knew
I've
what it
been using,
was.
well, because Rachel said she doesn't use, I've been looking up, I use it to log in to look up relator terms a fair amount, so.
I can put it in the chat, Rachel, if you want me to do that.
Yeah, can you put the username and password in the chat?
Sure, just a sec. I can type. There you go.
Okay, great.
Account ID or is the top is CCS cats and everything else is CCS 3355.
Okay, one moment. Okay, so in the chart, there will be these links to the RDA pages. I will click on one. Let's see, we'll do Creator Agent of Work. Okay, so on the side, there are policy statements. And right now there are 3 statements for LCPCC.
I thought you know you're just sharing your Excel screen, right?
Oh, are you seeing my screen? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Well, we can only see Excel. So if you're trying to share RDA stuff,
Oh,
we cannot
okay.
see that.
Let me try sharing that again. Can you see this again?
Yes, it's good.
Okay, so on this side, we have a drop-down menu for different or for different policy statements. You have LCPCC, and then there's also MLA, but we'll choose LCPCC. And then along the side, you can see a description of the statement. It will say LCPCC core and LCPCC practice. And there's another practice statement.
It's also got something there about metadata guidance document from LCPCC. On the right, under
Right.
LCPCC.
Where do you
Yeah,
see
right.
the metadata?
That second LCPCC. Yeah,
Oh,
right
here?
there. Yes.
See metadata guidance.
Yeah, so there's those too.
I'll have to look at that to see what that see if I can find that document. So I think a good example of the difference of if we were to choose RDA or LCPCC core would be that RDA says you can either record an unstructured description or a structured description. LCPCC practice is to record this element using a structured description. And Adrian posted a link to the metadata guidance document. So I think for creator agent of work, it makes sense to follow LCPCC practice because we'd want to use the structured description instead of an unstructured one.
Can you click on the unstructured description example? Because I don't even know what that means. I was just wondering what it looks like. Oh, okay.
I think that an unstructured description could be even going as far as first name first and then last name without following the authorized heading.
That's what I was actually wondering if that, okay, so that is what it could mean. Okay.
So I don't think this is the best example because this could still be what the authorized heading would look like. I don't know.
Oh yeah, they're the same.
They're the same.
Yeah, that's
So
helpful.
I don't think the examples are good enough yet.
No.
So I think we have a lot to think about. I think it's a good option to choose LCPCC over RDA if RDA does not seem sufficient enough. But it could still be useful to use the RDA toolkit to find the policy statements.
Wouldn't it be basically what we have now, which is follow RDA and additionally follow the LCPCC policy statements that clarify RDA? It's not, they're not conflicting with each other. The policy statements are, you know, choosing which option to use from RDA. not
Right.
together.
The LCCPCC policy statements are just a bit more specific.
Right, but that's the same as we have now.
Right. I think the bibliographic input standards page does have a specific order of preference of
Oh, you have it up. And I also put it in for you, Rachel.
yeah, Rebecca posted that in the chat. So the order of preference currently is the Catalogers Wiki, OCLC's bibliographic formats and standards, Library of Congress, Program for Cooperative Cataloging Policy Statements, and then RDA. So
essentially, would we be prioritizing, we would be switching it, right? We would be prioritizing the LCPCC statements over OCLC, right? Is that essentially, okay.
Over. I'm confused by that statement. We would prioritize LCPCCPS over OCLC in practice or in the chart?
I would say in the chart.
Okay.
For referring to how to enter data properly, like whether it's structured or unstructured. But we still obviously need to follow the OCLC standards for data in OCLC. So we if we choose to use the LCPCC policy statements column, we'd have to say that anything that's mandatory for OCLC standards would be CCS core and not mandatory. Although I guess we could potentially combine the two and have OCLC mandatory in a column instead of CCS core, but that might get too complex.
Ultimately, I don't think there's a lot of conflict between all of these. They just get more and more specific, and our order in which to follow things are kind of from most to least specific, which I think is good as it is and works. I mean, maybe I'm off, but I don't see a lot of situations where OCLC bib formats and standards is telling us to do one thing and LCPCC is telling us to do another thing. Like two conflicting things. But maybe that happens in things I don't often catalog.
Yeah, I agree. I think that they work well together and are really in line with what we already have, but it would just be a different page to refer to.
Yeah, and I don't think it hurts to have more things to reference, especially if you're getting really into something and don't understand. Reading about it a couple different ways might help you understand how to catalog something, or how to you know, if it's the first one of its kind in our catalog, how to set it up properly so that there's not a precedent set that we.
Okay, I think that we're going to want to take some more time to think about this topic. And I'll do some research into the metadata guidelines, and we can continue this discussion at the next meeting. But I'd like to move on to the next topic. So Virginia revised the series title and main title page by making it less wordy. So thank you for taking the time to do this work, Virginia. I did send it out to you with the link in the agenda. Does anyone have any suggestions on how to improve this page further?
I just had a question on one of the sections about under volume in a series. I just had a question about clarification on the where it says if a series authority record contains a note, follow the instructions of the note. But then I found the example a bit confusing, because if it says to follow the instructions of the note, which means don't make it a series, but then it says how it gives an example of a series that we treat locally as a series. So I'm wondering, when it says follow the instructions of the note, does that mean if we're working in OCLC but not in our own local database?
I think that can be clarified. We should say to follow the instructions for the local note if the local note says to treat it as a series. Otherwise, if it says not to treat
Oh, so
it
when you
as
say follow the instructions of the note, you mean when we're looking at the authority file in Polaris as opposed to
in
OCLC?
Polaris.
Yeah.
Oh, see, I
Mhm.
was thinking it was an OCLC. Yeah, I guess I was confused. Yeah, if you could clarify that that's meant to be the Polaris authority file, that would be.
Yeah, or
that'd be
local,
helpful.
or maybe local authority file or
Yeah,
something
just,
like that.
yeah, that would help. Thanks.
Okay, yeah. That'll. Yeah. it's probably-
Okay, yeah, that makes, okay, I get it now. Thanks.
That's better.
Yeah.
Tammy asked the volume number is often in the 800. Should we be removing it from there and moving it to the 490?
No, it should be still in the 800.
I mean, it can be in both, right?
Yeah, you can put actually both, but it should be in the 8.
Should we, is that also follow along then with the thing about local authority files? Because I know oftentimes in a record, it'll like, it won't say to use to put a volume number in the 800. But are there places where they're locally we should? Because like in some authority records, if it doesn't have a 642,
Yeah.
I assume that means you're not supposed to do that, but I guess.
But people do anyway, because they see it in whatchamacallit, the Goodreads and stuff like that.
Goodreads.
Well, that's what I was saying. Like, I think with those, putting in brackets in a 490, but then not putting in the 800.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can do it that way.
Ultimately,
Somebody really asked me, I just put in brackets in both places because it's not official, but they want it.
so I still feel fairly new to the consortium, so forgive me if this is very obvious to everyone, but how are the 490 versus 8XX like displaying to patrons, and how, like, what is the patron interaction with those fields? Because I think that really informs whether you specifically want the number or not.
They both display, actually. I was looking at
Okay.
patron view actually just yesterday, and it was funny because there's 490 and 800 were identical. And so it was literally just two identical statements right on top of each other.
Got it. Okay.
I don't know if patrons click in there to look, but yeah, they can
Yeah.
see them.
Okay.
Do we need the parts of this page that are standard practice? Or is that maybe confusing things? Because if you put something in here, it kind of indicates to people, oh, this is a local practice. What is this telling me? But, you know, like to Tammy's question, well, you just put the numbering in both fields. So do we need it here to say that?
I think, and this, I don't know, this is my personal perspective on it, particularly with series, is that it's very confusing for a lot of people. And so even though some things are national practice, I think it's helpful to have them written out instead of having to reference our local practice and separately reference the national practice. If someone, you know, has a graphic novel first in a series, they're trying to figure out how to do it. I find it helpful to have it all in one place. But I also recognize that if it's national practice, it's not, we don't have to have all national practice on our wiki because that would just become really out of hand. But like one of the suggestions in the revisions was like, you know, specifically saying, you know, oh, like large print needs to go on a separate record. Like that is also national practice, but I think it's helpful to keep because it's an issue that people have, even though it's national practice, it's something that comes up all the time. And I kind of feel similarly with series, even though it's national practice, it's an area where there's a lot of pitfalls that people fall into. And so I think having a little more detail here is helpful.
Do we need to add a statement about putting the volume in brackets if it's not in the authority record?
I think if we do decide to do that, we should, because that would be local practice, because that would be something different than, I mean, if we do decide that that's okay, then yeah, we should make a note about that because that's not national practice.
Would that be something we'd have to vote on then because we'd be adding a new practice? Or would it would just be like recommended that if you do decide to place the volume in the record, then you should put it in brackets?
Oh, you mean like if you decide to put a volume number in the 800 when the authority record tells you not to?
Yeah. But it's not required.
Are you just
would say-
asking Michelle about the 490 or the 8XX?
No, I think we're talking about the 8XX, because in the 490, you can
Yeah.
always put a number in brackets.
Right, so if it's gonna be the 8XX, I would think that would need a vote and a discussion because
Yeah.
that would be really different.
Yeah, it would.
And this is not an issue, like a problem that someone's raised, right? It just kind of came out of this
No.
conversation, so
Yeah.
I don't know if that's something that's worth pursuing.
It's probably not something we're pursuing right now. Michelle added in the chat that it would be any authority record that lacks a 642 field. And an example would be a series record for mystery series. Are there any other suggestions for this page? Should I go ahead and update the wiki with these changes? Yes, okay. Great. Next thing on the agenda, I did make some changes to the genre form headings. There have been some confusion on the indicators in the last several CAM meetings, and whether you should have subfield 2 for the LCSH terms that have become local genre headings. At one point, it was required in the past, but that was a very local, I mean, that was a very old policy from a long time ago. So I think some people thought that it was still the policy. So I was under the impression that it was the policy because that's what I was told, but apparently it is not. So I have updated the genre form headings to clarify that the local genre headings that were derived from LCSH terms should be placed in 655 with a second indicator of 0, but did not include the subfield 2. And I have just switched the placement of the local headings with the Library of Congress genre form terms since they are out of date and no one's been updating them, and added that statement. So I do have both the list of the LCSH derived local headings and all of the local headings at top. So those are easier to find. Are there any other suggestions for improving this page?
It might be helpful to have an example. So, I mean, I know it's explained like the ones that are derived from LCSH should be done this way, and I think it's really helpful to have the local headings and those LCSH derived ones by the top, but maybe in each of those sections, just format one of them as you would see it with the tag and the indicators and the subfields. Because I know it's all written out, but I think examples are very helpful to people.
Sure, I can add an example.
Use young adult fiction. It seems to be a problem.
I also have a question, just because I believe there's a link on this page to it, and for a while now, any page that links to it's been a dead link. Do you have any update on when OLAC's site is going to be functional again?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you very well.
Sorry. I know there's a link on this page, I think with the video game genre headings to OLAC, and that link's been dead for ages because OLAC, I don't know what they're doing to their site, but do you know when it's going to be back online by any chance? Does anybody know that?
They had moved some of their statements to university's digital repository. So,
because if you click on the link like right now, like I think I tried, yeah, if you click on that, it shouldn't work, or it doesn't, at least it didn't yesterday.
I'll have to look for it. I've updated some of the statements that I could find.
Okay. And I didn't know they
check
moved
on
their
that one.
site. I was wondering about that because it's been ages where I haven't been able to get in.
I know I have updated most of them, but this one I must have missed. There was one that I tried to update and I couldn't find the actual page for it, and they said they didn't even know where the actual page for it was now. So
Okay.
I'm still trying to figure out how to update that one, but I'm still doing more research into it. I don't remember which one that was off the top of my head.
Okay.
Is there anything else on this page that we should discuss? Okay, let's move on to the next thing on the agenda. So we had a request to discuss an old policy. I know this was discussed before I started working for CCS. It was a policy to allow anyone to modify the volume field of other libraries' items so they all match, and then contact the library when it has done. And the policy hasn't actually been described on the wiki yet, so they wanted to just confirm that they can continue this policy and ask that it be added to the wiki.
Seems reasonable to me.
I mean, I just did this the other week with a graphic novel and nobody got mad at me. So people at least seem to be okay with it.
So I think I would add this to the page called multi-volume call numbers. And I guess maybe in the background section.
If it's about contacting people, would it also go on the email etiquette page or whatever it's called?
Yeah, I could add it to both.
So we're saying if you add anything in another library's volume to email them,
Yes.
including set, so anything.
Yes, I think we should contact them. I have gotten some complaints in the past in which libraries were not contacted, so I think we should just require it for set 2.
Is it because some libraries actually want to make sure that everything matches their labels specifically? Like they'll put set on labels if it says set now, or? 'Cause
Yes.
then I could see why they'd want to be contacted. It was just that. Okay.
Adrian asks, is this just about adding the volume information or about merging records from single to multi-volume? This would be about changing how the volume designation appears in the item records. So frequently a library will use the wrong volume designation and they won't match. So it could be an issue of one library saying like discs 1 through 5 and the other saying set. Or it could be VOL period versus V period.
Oh, so we're not, oh, someone talking, sorry.
So it could definitely affect merging records when the merged record is merged from a single volume and does not have a volume. So that's also a common issue.
That's what I thought we were talking about. Okay.
So it could either be a mistake, because there could be records that say VOL period and others that say V period, or it could be the issue of merging.
Stuff like that, but it doesn't have to be so much except for this last time that you forced it.
So I will go ahead and update the pages. Oh, Sandy gave another example in the chat. She's been seeing a lot of items that just say 1 and V period, or 1 versus V period, I mean.
I have a question.
Sure.
Because there was an email thread just recently about not including the V in the volume field. Am I confused about that?
That was probably because the item didn't say volume on it. So if the item just says the number, then that's fine not to include volume. So it should match the item.
Okay.
So I think the issue was that there were some that matched the item and some that did not match the item.
Okay. All right. So another question. If I am moving items onto a multi-volume record set and I add in a volume number, does that mean I need to contact all of those libraries?
Yes, so if it's a lot of libraries on one record, you can send the email to the CATS listserv. But if it's just
Okay.
a few and it's a reasonable number, like 5 libraries or less, you can contact them directly.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other topics we'd like to discuss today? Okay, I will be following up by sending out the notes or the minutes as soon as I get them done, and we'll add the recording to the YouTube website. And if there's nothing else, we can adjourn the meeting. Thank you everyone for coming today. And have a good week.
Thanks. Bye-bye.